Father, and our King. Father, we come before you, thanking you for remembering and calling us, thanking you for the words that you teach us. Father, may you reveal your glory in the hidden secrets that are in your word. Father, we come before you looking forward to understanding and seeing the secrets that are hidden in your word. We come before you, thanking you for remembering and giving you thanks in the name of your Son, Yeshua, our soon coming Mashiach King. Amen.
Amen. All right.
Albert, would you hand me the iced tea? I'm going to put it in the fridge.
Sure. Got it? Yeah. All right. So we've been kind of hanging out in the book of James here. And I'm wondering if you guys can remember anything yet that James talks about.
His name wasn't away from last week.
Okay, just count it all joy. Good.
When you fall into diverse temptations.
Diapers?
Diverse.
Oh, diverse. What's a diaper? I mean, there were some diapers that were definitely tribulation.
Fall into a diaper.
But yeah, wow. Okay, yes.
Situation, yeah.
So, do you remember when it starts out in verse 1? How does James, Yaakov, approach the book?
What do you mean approach?
Well, he's not coming across with the authority of who he's related to.
As a
It's servant.
He's coming as a bond servant, right? His slave. We soften it today and use servant. It's slave. Okay. So he's approaching them, the text. He's writing a text in humility, right? And he's writing it. Who's the audience?
The 12 tribes who are in the dispersion.
Mm-hmm. Can that include us today?
Yeah.
We're still in the dispersion, right? We're still dispersed, right? Okay, so I think it's still relevant for us today, although we weren't the original audience, right? Okay. And the topic du jour, I think, is what you're getting to, that he's talking about are trials. How do we deal with trials, right? And he's giving us a bit of a, what's the word? Maybe an attitude adjustment about how to look at trials. I feel like Bart is frozen here looking at me.
Yeah, it does look that way. He hasn't moved.
Can anybody say something or leave me a note in the chat bar that you guys are there? Because I'm just seeing a frozen picture.
Is it recording?
It is recording. Oh, I saw someone move. Okay, good. Thank you. So it's just the picture that's froze. It's just I was a little concerned looking at Bart the whole time.
He's looking pretty stern.
He is. He's like he's chastising me. I feel like it's a trial. Okay, so so he starts out with his position. Attitudinal position is all joy, count it, brothers. Okay, so in both Hebrew and Greek, in their language, they have no punctuation, right? And so and they didn't have font size changes and superscripts and all of that. You couldn't like recarve it higher. Once it's carved, it's set in stone, right? So literally. So the word order would change the emphasis of the meaning. And we also see this a lot in like the Psalms and in the prophets and poetry, in Proverbs, Ecclesiastes, things like this. The word order is all over the place. So in English, we always learn subject, verb, object. In Hebrew, it's verb, subject, object. Until you get to your 5th quarter of Hebrew lessons at the university, and then all Gehenna breaks loose, and it could be anywhere. It could start with a verb, it could start with an object, might start with a pronoun, who knows what it's going to do. Because like in poetry, they're trying to get things to maybe be, equal sentences or
to mean the same thing.
yeah, exactly. So they changed the order then to help with that. So James Yaakov's point here is the all joy. That's what he's trying to emphasize. In the midst of the trials of various kinds, or diapers of various kinds, that there is a way to have all joy. Okay? And part of that is for us to accept his sovereignty.
Yeah.
And the more you realize that nothing happens without his permission, right? The easier it is to be okay with whatever's going on in life, okay? Now, do keep in mind, and Paul talks about this, it says that it'll be for his glory. It doesn't say it'll be for ours. So in other words, it doesn't mean it won't hurt. It doesn't mean it doesn't frustrate us. It doesn't mean that we will understand it. But it will all work out for his glory, okay? So in the sovereignty of God, if we understand that everything that happens happens because of him, or he has allowed it, okay? The question becomes, well, what's my response to it then? How am I going to respond to this trial? Because we have two options. We can react to the trial, or we can respond to the trial. Same thing's true when you go to the doctor. So you have some sort of illness, you go to the doctor, and he shoots you with a shot, and the doctor says, oh, they're reacting to this. Is that good or bad?
Usually bad.
Depends on the reaction.
Well, obviously, yeah, it's going to be a bad thing, right? Okay, but if they say, oh, they're responding to the medicine,
Then it's a good.
now it's a positive thing, okay? So every trial that comes into our life, we have the choice, free will, of saying, God has allowed this into my life. He believes I'm capable of dealing with it. He thinks my shoulders are broader than I do. He thinks I'm ready for this trial, because Paul also tells us that no trial will overcome you except that which is common to man. So this isn't like all of a sudden this trial has come into my life and God's sitting in heaven and he's like, oh, didn't see that coming. No, he totally knew that was coming. He allowed that to come, right?
Mhm.
So nothing that we will be tried with is uncommon to man. Let me get to Zoom here and open the door. And there we go. All right. So we are in the book of James, Isa, still in chapter 1. So God has allowed the trial to come into my life. It's not a trial that someone else hasn't already had before me. Okay, it's common to mankind. God is my biggest cheerleader in the trial. He wants you to succeed. Not only that, he's given you the trial to prove your loyalty to him, to prove your faith, okay? So, and he thinks you can do this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have given you that trial. He thinks you're capable of massive success at this, okay? Change the setting here.
Come up, baby. Bobby. Do you want to come up, honey?
There. So he's allowed it. He thinks I can do well at this trial. He wants me to do well at the trial. He's my biggest cheerleader. And Paul also tells us that he's provided a way of escape. So there is a way of making it through this trial successfully. The issue becomes, what's the definition of success here? Because like I said, it always works out for God's glory, maybe not Albert's glory, right? So he may give me complete success in the endeavor, okay, physically, okay. He may send reinforcements to help me with the trial. I may die in the trial, but being empowered by the Ruach HaKodesh, do exactly what he wanted me to do. Case in point, Yeshua on the cross. He died going through the trial, but he did everything right, and that brought glory to God, right? Okay, so we have to kind of be careful with that definition of success there, right? So the test, all tests are to be seen as positive things in your event, in your life. The test is a good thing because it's helping you come to maturity in faith. You wouldn't grow in your faith without the test. Do you go upstairs at the gym sometimes? Mm-hmm. Do they still have the people lifting those weights? People lift weights up there?
Oh, yeah.
Why do they do that?
Resistance.
So resistance is going to make their muscles stronger, right? So the idea of faith is a muscle. You're going to need resistance to make your faith muscle stronger. Without resistance, it gets flabby, right? And you have to go back to the beginning and restart that exercise program again sometimes, okay? So the idea of that trial is to benefit you. It is for your benefit that you are going through the trial. Gee, he really loves me, right? Okay. So this idea of like in the X-Files, it said, I believe. So to say I believe is to invite testing. As soon as you sign on the dotted line and say, I believe in you, Father, you have now opened up a relationship that includes testing. Same thing happens with your own children. Okay, it's no different. I mean, it happens in regular life too. Okay, is that when we're little, we get tested. Today, one of the things I see with kids today, like in the karate school, I call our tests recitals for the little kids. Because if I call it a test, they freak out. Mm-hmm. Oh, test. Tests are bad. Tests are evil. I do bad on tests in school, blah, 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 right? So I go, oh, it's not a test. It's a recital. Oh, okay. Totally fine. Right?
I had a teacher call it an opportunity.
Yeah, they're opportunities, right? Yeah. So the idea of a test, the word test is a neutral thing. The word trial is a neutral thing. There are two possible outcomes, right? Mm-hmm. So just because it's called a test doesn't mean you fail, right? Or you're not doing it because you're failing in the class. The test is simply a tool to see where you're at in the process. The teacher gives the test. In this case, our Father gives us tests to see where our faith is at. It's not a bad thing. That's a glorious thing. He's so smart, right? So if you don't want to be tested, don't make the declaration, I believe in you. Because they're tied intimately together. You can't believe and not have a test. You can't say, I lift weights and not go to the gym and lift them. It doesn't work that way, right? And we go back through all the fathers of the faith. Abraham was the prime example of getting tested, right? Tests are a part of every relationship. So James wants to encourage us to prove ourselves as doers of the word. This is the thing that Martin Luther was so upset about, is the practicality of Yaakov's words, because he wanted everybody to be doers, and he tells us some very specific things to do, right? And Martin Luther's idea is that it was all again, it's kind of a Greek mindset. It's all about doctrines. It's all about our thoughts, okay? It's not about our actions. And here he is saying, you can't have faith without works. To Martin Luther, this was anathema. How could that be? Because everything for their time period it's all about how you think. It's sole fide, only by faith, not by works. The Catholic Church was by works. They had indulgences and all these works that you had to do. And they were fighting against those works, trying to get rid of all of that ungodly tradition of men, right?
The problem is the works of the church weren't the same as the works of this.
Yes, exactly. Exactly correct. Okay? So he wants us to prove ourselves, in other words, an action, to be doers of the word. So again, pop quiz here. What was he talking about? Was he talking about the Gospel of John, doing the Gospel of John?
No.
No.
No. Why?
He was talking about doing Torah.
Yeah, the Gospel of John didn't exist yet, did it? Was he talking about Little Women, A Tale of Two Cities, the Gulag Archipelago? No, none of these things are written. What's the only thing he can be talking about? Torah, right? Be doers of the word. The word is Torah, okay? So what does he say about those who only hear? That they are deluding and deceiving themselves. Keep in mind, it doesn't mean that they didn't hear. What's their problem?
They didn't do.
They didn't do. They heard, they just didn't do, right? Okay. But that hearing in and of itself is insufficient. It must be connected to action, right? And that's a very Hebraic thought, because hearing means obeying, right? Shema Yisrael. It's not just listen to it. It's not just recognize it when the pastor says it. It means do it. Okay? So if he was writing to a very Jewish audience, would he need to say that to them?
They probably understand.
Just like
They understand.
you don't
to
see
hear is to do.
a Sabbath defined in the Brit either, because everybody knew.
There was no question about it. It was culturally just there, right? And that would be no different pagan in terms of the pagan rituals. I wouldn't have to, if I was talking about Yule, if I said I celebrated Yule last night, when was it? What day of the year? Christmas. It's just, we just know those things, right? Okay. Oh yeah, I was listening to that song about the reindeers. Ah, it's Christmas. I don't have to go further than that, right? It's just culturally acceptable. So he was writing to an audience that needs to understand this point. So that means there's Gentiles involved here. He's having to explain this to the Gentiles that are a part of these synagogues. So instruction or hearing isn't enough. It has to be worked out. And unless the instruction results in action, I didn't have a verb in there. And only the Gentiles would need that. Only the Gentiles would need that explanation, that it has to have that action connected to it. Okay, so let's go to chapter 1, verse 23 and 24 now. It says, "For if anyone is a hearer of the word and not a doer, he is like a man who looks intently at his natural face in a mirror. For he looks at himself and goes away and at once forgets what he was like." Okay, well, first of all, in the first century, they didn't have mirrors. They had polished silver.
Okay.
But so that just understand that that's a little bit different than what we call a mirror today, right? Okay. So this is a very rabbinic style argument. He gives you the argument. Now he's going to give you what we call a case study. He's going to give you examples so that you understand what he's talking about. So what is someone who only hears like?
Blind.
use only the words in the sentence.
Forgetful.
Could be, so it could be blind, could be forgetful. Okay. Anything else?
Inactive,
Not a doer.
not a doer.
Okay. So this person goes and stands in front of a mirror. He looks in this polished mirror, and he walks away and he can't remember what he saw. He forgets the image that he saw. So the point of this mirror, of a polished piece of metal, is that you look inside it, you look at it, and you see the way you are. You see reality.
From the outside only. It does
Sure.
not show you the
Doesn't reveal anything inside. Absolutely, yeah. Okay. He's saying that you see something you're not.
Okay, you can say that.
You're
because you're seeing only the outside, but who you are is the spirit that dwells in you.
Oh, absolutely.
And that's who you are, and you can't see it.
Sure, absolutely. So when you walk away, if you are not a doer of the word, you walk away and forget that you were, and you're becoming something else. So remember, this is a simile, right? Because it's using like. It's like this, right? So we have to we're forced to make and understand that comparison, okay? Verse 25, but the one who looks intently into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and perseveres, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. All right, so we got a ton of stuff to unpack here. So the one who looks intently into the perfect law, the law of liberty, you could put Torah there. The Torah is what gives us liberty, okay? It tells us where the boundaries are, right? And perseveres, in other words, you abide in doing it, okay? So that's an action. Being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts. So if it's acts, if you're doing actions, that's effectual. It's working, okay? He will be blessed in his doing. So again, he's talking about it's these action things that are important, okay? So you can't look into Torah, into the perfect law, the law of liberty. You can't look at it and do nothing. If you look at it and do nothing, you're not abiding, and it's not effectual in your life, okay? So the Greek word there for law is nomos. You might know it from the word antinomian. An antinomian is someone who is lawless, okay? The lawless one who comes in the future, we would call him the anti-Messiah, right? He's also referred to as the lawless one. So we would expect him not to keep what?
The law.
Torah, the law. Okay, he's lawless. He teaches you not to keep the laws. Okay. Of course, the Hebrew word there is the Torah. So when the New Testament says do not be lawless, it says do not be without Torah. Paul, Shaul, uses nomos in several senses. So there are three ways that you can use the word nomos in the New Testament. And Paul uses all three in the book of Romans. The first is that it can mean Torah, okay? The second is it could be referring to the oral law, the rabbinical laws, okay? The third way is it can be used as a principle. So the law of sin in my flesh, you can't find a law of sin in my flesh in the Torah. That phrase doesn't exist in the Torah. So if I go, oh, Paul's talking about the law of sin in my flesh. And so I run back in the Tanakh and I'm searching and I can't find that. But it's used in the sense of the law of gravity. It's a principle. It's not, I can't find the law of gravity in there either. Okay. It's not in the Tanakh, right? But the principle is people fell down and died. Someone falls off the temple and they die. Law of gravity is in effect. But that's a principle. It's not Torah, right? So Paul uses all three of those in the book of Romans. And this is why we get so much misunderstanding about the book of Romans, is unless you know which one of those he's using in which spot, you will come to different conclusions about Paul's arguments. So the law of liberty. I can't find it in the Tanakh, but he's talking about the principle of it. We've talked about this before. If I'm reading this book and it says that the man threw the fag in the fire, what did he mean?
Threw a cigarette in the fire.
He threw the cigarette in the fire, because that's an old name for that, right? Okay. So when I'm reading the book, should I be all of a sudden concerned? Some evil's happening to someone? No. The context is that was an old word used for that situation, right?
They still use it in Britain and the UK.
Oh, do they?
Yeah.
Oh, interesting. So what are some of the questions we might need to ask when to understand that? When was the book written? Were you outdoors? Things like this. Are you talking about a person? Well, no, I'm talking about a cigarette. Oh, we had a flyby there for a minute, right? You have to ask questions of the text. So the perfect principle of liberty. Would I find that like in the Star Spangled Banner?
I don't think so.
It's not in that song. Isn't that the song about liberty?
I don't think it was written yet.
Well, it wasn't written yet. That would be out of context, right? Okay. So when we think of liberty, what do we think of?
Being free.
A bell. Okay.
Yeah. Being free of something.
Mm-hmm.
Free to come and go.
Okay. So freedom in America, in American's modern sense, means that you can do whatever you want. I'm free. I can do whatever I want. I mean, there are a few limitations here and there, but
There's a few that you're not going to want to do.
Yeah. Okay. They have a few of
Well,
those.
You can do them,
advantageous.
but there might be ramifications for your choices.
Right. So that definition is what the Bible calls licentiousness.
Oh boy.
Licentiousness is I can do whatever I want.
Okay.
I have a license to sin. I have a license to break the law. Why do we need driver's licenses?
It's a good question.
There are those that say you don't.
Well, yeah. So
and they have good arguments for it.
So the point is that the government licenses us, right? So they're giving me a license to go and do something. Yeah, yeah, I agree. It's totally about money, but what otherwise I can't do it. I'm not supposed to do it without that license. It gives me a license to do something, right? Licentiousness is the same thing. Licentiousness is I'm giving you a license to sin. So by the church's definition of grace today, they give lots of license to sin because they've redefined what all the words mean, okay? So if you were a first century Jew, were you thinking Star-Spangled Banner freedom and liberty? Definitely not, okay? Liberty to them meant to have restrictions or boundaries or borders around you. Their definition of freedom is different. If I say, yeah, I believe in freedom, no one I would talk to today would go, oh, you believe in boundaries?
No.
That would not be their thought.
They would think
Okay.
you have no boundaries.
They would think I have no boundaries. But to this group of people hearing him say this, they're thinking, oh, you're pro-boundaries. boundaries are healthy for you. Boundaries are good for you. Boundaries keep you safe. So literally, pro-boundaries, anti-boundaries is how we read the text today, whether it's good or bad. We're literally reading that word with a different meaning today, okay? So we see restrictions as things that prevent us from being free. The rabbis taught the opposite, that the man with restrictions is free. Well, how did they come up with that? Crazy rabbis?
You know right from wrong.
Yeah, because they knew right from wrong. Yeah, so not doing those bad things that's good for you. If there's a fence between me and that bad thing, that's a great thing, right?
There's a line on the other side of it. You'll be darn happy there's a fence.
A lion, you said.
Yeah.
God, I heard line. I'm like, if there's a line over there, but
No,
I was going to go with it. So how is the man that is restricted free?
He can do anything he wants within those boundaries.
Yeah, exactly. Anything you want to do inside the boundaries is now totally fine. Okay. How is the man who is unrestricted bound?
Usually had to be.
Well, if you have a fence around something, it's keeping you safe within it. If you don't have a fence, you have to keep yourself safe from anything that can get to you.
Okay. So I would have to know what I'm required to do and not do in that case, and take
Boundaries.
responsibility for myself.
But that's boundaries.
So that becomes a boundary, right? Okay.
Without boundaries, you have no security. You have nothing to base your life on. You
And
just
there's no
go
limit to evil.
wandering. Yeah,
hmm
and it would be very uncomfortable.
Like society today is very uncomfortable.
Okay. So if I have no rules then, and I don't know what to do, therefore I'm not free from the worry of doing things wrong without knowing. So I say, well, I have no boundaries. I can do whatever I want. But now I have to worry about what's out there.
You have no boundaries preventing you from doing open heart surgery on a friend, but might not be a good idea.
His
if you
wife
don't
might
know.
not feel that good about it. Yeah. Okay. So what we're kind of getting back to is this heart position that Bill was talking about, right? So when I have those boundaries there, my heart responds to that. It feels safe. Okay. But when I don't have those boundaries, now I'm filled with worry.
Well, you also have a lot of unsurety.
There's no certainty, right? Okay. So this is one of the things I noticed when I came out of the church, out of the institutional church, that I no longer had to worry about everything. That all of a sudden there was this set of rules for me, and I knew exactly what they were, and I knew if I was breaking them and if I wasn't breaking them. And I was like, well, this is a whole lot easier than I thought it was, because I was having to rely on the Holy Spirit to, whether I should step on that crack or not. I didn't know, right?
Well, it's like a parent that, like you said, you had that one that never said no to their child. So they didn't set boundaries, so the child never knew whether he was getting in trouble or not.
Correct.
And sometimes he would get in trouble, but sometimes he wouldn't for doing the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And not intended disrespectfully, but there's no question about a cookie being taken as an extra is a sin or not.
Right. 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 Okay, so freedom comes from knowing how the world works. Okay. Now we have a Greek way about how the world works. It's not the same way as how the Father says it works. Okay. So you're then at the whim of your desires when you have no boundaries. Whatever you want to do, you can just go do it. I'm in charge of me, right? I've made myself God. But that means that I'm not free from the Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination in my life either.
Right.
We don't have the standard.
There's no standard to know, right? Okay, and it will push me wherever it wants to be taken, and I must reign over it in the boundaries or inside of those commandments. Okay, my job is to control that Yetzer Hara. When I control the evil inclination, then I don't have to worry. Then I don't have to be afraid of these things. I know where the boundaries are at. I know what the rules of the road are. When the Yetzer Hara arises, I can say that's not part of my code of conduct. I'm not doing that. In my house, we don't do that. And then I am free from the evil inclination. Okay? The Hebraic approach is totally opposite from the Greek approach. What allows a man to live by a code, we see it as a restriction on our freedom. To be free is to have rules in a Hebraic worldview. In a Greek worldview, it means not having rules. And yet our country has more rules than any other country on the planet, and more people keep wanting to come here. What is it about rules that's so attractive to them?
Well, they know where they stand.
And in their own country?
They fear their life at every moment.
Correct. Okay. I can actually have a pretty fair amount of certainty about the coronavirus not killing me, because there's a whole set of rules that my country has put into effect to prevent that from happening. The people in Wuhan today do not have that certainty.
Yeah.
Right?
No, they eat ferrets and they eat
Snakes and
snakes
whatever,
and,
and yeah,
And this is where they think the virus came from.
absolutely.
From eating
meat
carrots?
market.
Uh,
At a meat market.
Also
in Wuhan,
crustaceans and
Where they sold
all
snakes.
sorts.
where they sold snakes and ferrets and all kinds of.
Oh, ferret, you said, not carrot.
Ferret,
Okay.
yes. Yeah, not a
No,
carrot.
no.
Carrots are still good.
Little four-legged thing with a long tail.
It's little
Okay.
rodents.
but
So-
it also could be their two biological weapons depots or whatever they have there.
Yeah, there was something like that nearby. So our whole society is built on the idea today they're trying to convince us that rules are bad. And we have to get rid of rules, and we have to get rid of rituals and things like this. But society with no rules is called anarchy. Anarchy's not good. Anarchy's bad. But
Yeah.
that's where it's pushing us.
We kind of joked about that. The anarchists, when they were rising up so much in the 90s and we had the riots in town, it's like, well, if they really want their way, then we should just go out and shoot them and they can't complain because that's what they're.
That's anarchy then, right? Yeah. Of course, no one ever wants to take it that far. You know, they'll stop before they get there. Again, think about children, grandchildren today. Are they just so thankful that we have rules? Do you think most kids think about rules being good things?
No.
They don't have wisdom with them.
Because they don't have wisdom yet, right? Yet all of the freedom they have comes from rules. Culture today wants to break those rules down. The societal idea of freedom is to be without restriction. But Mom, I want to stay out to midnight. No. No, it's in your best interest that you don't. Bad things happen after midnight when you're alone out on the
The
streets.
lights come
Right,
on
yeah.
outside, you need to be inside.
Okay. Yeah. Right, verse 25. So let's read this from a Hebraic standpoint. But the one who looks intently at the perfect law, the law of liberty, that's a principle, and perseveres, abides in it, does it, being no hearer who forgets, but a doer who acts, he will be blessed in his doing. The rules that remove from me the worries of what life should be like. the perfect law of liberty provides me restrictions that tell me how to live, and therefore it removes my concerns about life. I can go through life with peace instead of worry. The one who looks at that and abides in it, that man is blessed in all that he does. I want to be that guy. That's the guy I want to be, right? That I'm blessed in everything that I do. That person is living according to the guidelines of how the universe was built. God put a set of rules in line for the universe. He calls it Torah. He says, this is the best way you can live your life. It will benefit you greatly. In the process, I'm going to try you to see how it's coming along in the process of you getting on board with my plan. That's a good thing for you, not a bad thing for you, okay? So in business, you can work against the grain of the universe, but you wouldn't be blessed in all you do. You could end up with a huge heap full of money. You might end up with a super yacht at $58 million owned by Russian oligarchs, but you will not be blessed in all that you do. You'll just have a lot of money.
Yeah.
Okay. So do what Yah says to do. We already talked about that. Okay. Just a case study. So let's look at the Bill of Rights, the ones in our Constitution. So we say that our rights and freedoms come from our Constitution, right? We have this law that was put into effect, right? And we get our freedoms from that. God's government is a moral government. Okay. Can we find them all in Torah? Can we find all of our constitutional freedoms in Torah? A lot of them, okay? Is our version of freedom of speech today the same as Torah's?
No.
Not a chance.
And it's not even the same as when it was written up by the founding fathers.
Things have changed some as culture changes, right? Okay.
Yeah.
How about the right to bear arms? Is that the same as Torah's version?
No, you're doing it and I'm not.
He has sleeves on. Rich has sleeves.
Yes, there's sleeves
Albert
versus non-sleeves. Nice homophone there. So the founders were clearly rooted in Torah, okay? But they also had a Greek worldview that they were trying to work through in the time, okay? And they were doing their best. But that Greek worldview has pushed us so far out trying to remove restrictions that it often no longer resembles the initial intent. So in some religious societies, some speech is punishable by death. Can you think of an example?
Yeah, all you have to do is go against Allah.
Okay, yeah. So was it the maybe 90s or early 2000s? There was a guy who wrote that book. It was like
Salman Rushdie.
Salman Rushdie, yes, the Satanic Verses, and they put a fatwa out against the guy, and they like every Muslim on the earth was supposed to go kill him because he wrote this book and it said something bad about Allah and Muhammad, right? Okay, so in their religious society, the idea of punishing someone for something they said is still evident today. Would we do that with inside Christianity?
Well,
So how about,
Crusades.
huh?
Crusades.
So okay, so
Witch
did
hunts.
okay, yeah, good. So we do have examples of this. Where would we get that idea from that we could do that? Oh, Torah. How about if a child is rebellious to their parents, punishable by
Stoning.
death,
Yeah,
right?
in the Torah.
Now, if I wanted to do that today, they'd throw me in prison,
Yeah,
right?
put you in the electric chair probably.
Do you think that that could have included speech? Rebellious child.
Yeah, you couldn't, you had to honor your mother and father, and if you said anything, in fact, if you said anything bad about them,
That would
that's punishable.
bring shame or
Mhm.
dishonor to them.
Mhm. So immediately, everybody in the and again, we don't have any extant literature whatsoever that that commandment ever took place, okay, or was used,
Well,
right?
yeah, because the parents are the first one to, the ones that are supposed to throw the first rock.
Sure. So it would be incumbent upon the whole community, if a child is doing something like that, you would correct the child, because no one in the community wants to go stone this little kid, right?
Right.
Or even a big kid, right?
Yeah, it
Yeah,
used to
even a
be.
50-year-old.
Even no one wants to. It's like it's not like there's a secret group of people walking around with rocks. They're like, "Ooh, who can we get now?" That's not what's going on in the community. How about blasphemy?
In our society,
Totally okay for us.
Sure.
yeah.
It's done all the time.
What happens in Torah?
Oh, ain't nice.
Capital punishment.
Mhm.
Yes.
That's freedom of speech. Our freedom of speech today is not what's acceptable in the kingdom, because blasphemy is acceptable today and not acceptable in Torah.
Yeah, well, even saying something evil about someone to another person is in effect, according to Torah, is in effect murdering them.
Correct. Gossip is murder. Mhm. So we would have very little restrictions actually on debating issues today. People are very upfront about saying things and stuff like that, right? But just don't pettifog the world's greatest deliberative body. The sages were quite intent and verbose over the interpretation of a scripture. So when you go back and you look at rabbinic literature, the older rabbinic literature, they were yelling at each other back and forth, but they never lost control. Okay, they never went over certain boundaries. Blaspheming God tears at respect and honor that goes up the hierarchy to the king. So if it starts down here, it will eventually work its way up to higher levels. So the sooner you stop it in the community, okay, of believers, the better, right? But since we don't have a king, we remove many of the presuppositions about the speech behavior. So there are things that you would never say against the king in England or France. If you did, they would behead you because they had a king, and whatever the king said is what the rule of the law, the land of the law,
Law of the land.
thank you, was. Okay, but see, we got rid of the king. We have a president. So as soon as you switch that, I can say whatever I want about the president.
Yeah.
Because it's a different model. We switched. We said we don't want a king. Okay. Now, does that give us more freedom?
Actually, no. I mean, they think that it does, but it doesn't.
What it does is it makes
Not
me take the
biblically.
not biblically. It makes me take the responsibility to live a biblical life and not say things that shouldn't be said, right? So because of all of these words and because of our governmental model and stuff like that, it's hard in our culture to presuppose the behaviors that Yaakov is thinking about in his culture. They didn't have a president then, just by the nature of that. Okay, we look at things different because we don't have a king. They had a king. Okay,
But isn't the king and the president kind of the same thing?
but so in the presidency, we didn't establish him with certain authority. We
Okay.
took
Limited
away the
powers.
authority, limited powers,
Okay.
so that he couldn't do certain things. Then we took those powers and we gave some to the judicial and some to the legislative.
But the king, he is the ultimate authority.
He,
And-
judge,
and
jury,
you-
executioner.
Yes, if you bring dishonor on the king.
Yep.
You die.
You're going to meet his henchman.
Well, we're gonna see what's gonna happen here.
Yes. Yeah.
So to Yaakov, the perfect law of liberty, that word there is teleo, and it means completed or completely or correct. So it's the perfect law of liberty, the perfect principle. It's the correct principle, is how God does things, his commandments and instructions. Paul says that against these things, the fruit of the Spirit, there is no law. Galatians 5:23b. So Yaakov is writing to Roman citizens and Jews who view this completely different. Their understanding of law is completely different than the Hebraic understanding or a rabbinic understanding of law, of how we look at restrictions and boundaries. Verse 26. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So he seems to be shifting topics to talking about controlling your speech, but he hasn't shifted topics yet. He's still talking about the same stuff. His comment here is connected to the preceding argument. How? If I look at the law of liberty, if I look at the law of liberty and am a doer of it, then I will be blessed, right? There's an old saying, as a man thinks, so he is, right? So do not eat the bread of a man who is stingy. Do not desire his delicacies, for he is like the one inwardly calculating. Eat and drink, he says to you, but his heart is not with you. This is Proverbs 23 and verse 7. So Solomon's wisdom is filled with comments about the power of the tongue. It is an untamed thing in a person's life that can cause him great grief or success. We have to learn to control that tongue. So James is pulling on this wisdom from Proverbs, from Solomon. Often the wise man does not speak what comes to his mind. So just because it goes in your head doesn't mean it needs to come out your mouth, right?
You need to have a filter.
Well, yeah, every once in a while you're just like, oh, did that come out? Oops. Wasn't supposed to do that, right? Okay. So he's saying that this may be a good measuring stick of a man's character. Not the only one, but maybe an obvious one. Okay? Because every day throughout our lives, we talk. And so it would be a very natural thing to notice about people. Oh, they say a lot of unusual things. Oh, that person curses the king every time I see him. That person's tongue is out of control. It would be an easy fruit to see. And that your tongue is kind of like a magnifying glass for what's inside. Okay? Again, I say this many times. When I first came into this movement, when I first came out of the institutional church, I was really angry. I was not as much at them as at myself for not catching it sooner. Okay? But if you look back at the posts that I was doing 10 years ago, there was all this anger inside of me about being lied to and stuff like that. And it all came out. Okay? But 10 years has went by, mistakes were made, wisdom was gained, trials were had, and the outcome is I don't do that anymore because it's unproductive, right? Now I just talk about lunch with Yakov. I had lunch with Yakov today, learned this, right? Yeshua says the same thing about the parashim in the New Testament being whitened sepulchers, white gravestones, okay, or tombs. The point is that there's this literal tomb here with a skeleton in it. You're white on the outside. They've painted you. It's Passover. They've painted you, and you look really nice on the outside, but inside, dead bones. Yeah, there's nothing living inside of that person, right? So you have actions on the outside are very different than what's going on the inside in your heart. We would say it this way today: the person says one thing but does another. Okay, so we call that hypocrisy. Then
Speak with forked tongue.
Speak with forked tongue. Right, verse 26. If anyone thinks he is religious and does not bridle his tongue, but deceives his heart, this person's religion is worthless. So religious there, he is speaking to those who claim an allegiance to God or gods. They've made the claim, I believe. Okay? Not only are they deceived, but their religion, his words, is worthless. So what is the purpose of claiming a relationship with God? If I have no control over the speech that comes from me, I'm doing no good. I'm hurting his case, not helping his case. When Judah was really young, I had taught him this phrase from, was it Churchill? It's better to sit in a room quietly and be thought a fool than to open your mouth and remove all doubt, right? And like,
Oh, wow.
isn't that great?
That was my
Churchill?
father-in-law's favorite.
Sure, I'm pretty sure it's Churchill that said that. But I'm convinced to this day that's why he never talks. He just sits and listens to everything.
Oh,
you
Judah,
know?
not Churchill. I'll say, well,
Yeah, I know.
Churchill's dead.
Yeah, I know.
So it's,
He doesn't talk either. But yeah.
There's a whole nother reason for
But
that.
Judah's just always been this very quiet kid. You know, he sits and then at times he'll just say things, and I'm just like, oh my God, you were listening. I'm like we'll have biblical discussions or something. I'm like, wow, that was like 2 years. You've been thinking about that for 2 years to come up with a counterpoint. Like, wow, this is amazing, right? Okay, this idea of worthlessness that he uses there, or vanity. In Greek, it's mateios. The Hebrew equivalent is found in Ecclesiastes. It's the word hevel. So when I look up under Blue Letter Bible, it will tell me the biblical usage is devoid of force, truth, success, or result. Useless, of no purpose. Ecclesiastes uses vanity or wind, basically, no substance or functional, right? Same consonantal letters that are found in bohu, in Genesis 1:2, which is translated void. Tohu, formless and void, yeah. So he is emphasizing how empty it is. It's empty like an idol, okay? So your religion, it's idolatrous. It looks good on the outside. Here's this wonderful little statue of Diana, but
it's really dirty, Diana.
Yeah, it's dead. There's nothing there, right? Useless. So it's not that the man does not have words, but the words have no actions. If you're going to say something, you have to be willing to back it up with action. Otherwise, better just to not say anything yet, right? All right, verse 27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So now he gives us another case study, okay? Again, this is how we know it's a very rabbinic style of writing, because they give you verses or comments, and then they give you case studies to make it very practical. Here's the correct example, he says. It's functional. It's practical. Visit orphans and widows in their affliction. Same thing Torah says. He's just teaching us Torah, okay? When Paul came to Jerusalem for the council, and then they sent him on his way, they were like, there's one thing more than anything else. There's one thing we insist that you do. What was it? We need to do Book of Acts more. Make sure that you help the widows and the orphans. And Paul responds, that's the very thing that I want to do more than anything, is to help the widows and the orphans. They're like, great, off you go. Go do it. Don't think about it. Don't write about it.
Just go do it.
Go do it. Be on your way. Pick up your sandals. Let's move.
Off you
Okay.
go.
Yeah. So again, what might Yaakov be pulling on to develop this thought? He's not making up something new. Where did he get this thought? Who taught? Yeah. Who taught? Torah, right? Yeah. This is, again, it's not like this is really hard, except we've made it hard in the church because we didn't have the context.
Well, when we've also been told that we cannot keep all of these rules.
Right.
In the church, I go back a ways, and that was the deal. You can't keep them.
Oh, I was told that if I stayed in the Old Testament too much, that I would become bound up.
And I had somebody come say and
I
told
would
me
be
that.
lost.
And I said, here, let's go to Luke. And let's go look at Elizabeth and Zechariah. It says right there,
Mm-hmm.
and I read it to them, and this was on a Shabbat service, and I didn't make any friends,
Maybe lost a few.
but I said, you can do it.
Mm-hmm.
Look at this. They did this work blamelessly.
Right. Right. So in Shemot, Exodus 34, 6-7, it says, and Yehovah passed by before him and proclaimed, Yehovah God, merciful and gracious, long-suffering, and abundant in goodness and truth, keeping mercy for thousands, forgiving iniquity, transgression, and sin, and that they will by no means clear the guilty, visiting the iniquity of the fathers upon the children, and upon the children's children, under the third and the fourth generation. So who's this describing?
All of the people that don't pay attention.
No. It said in the first verse, and Yehovah passed by before him and proclaimed, Yehovah God, Elohim, merciful and gracious. Who's he describing? Himself. This is the character of God.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's merciful and gracious.
Amen.
Okay?
Yeah.
So if he is merciful and gracious, can his Messiah be anything different?
Nope.
No. Can we be anything different?
Should not.
Well, yeah, good usage there. Yeah, we shouldn't be any different, right? Okay. So if you show me a life of compassion, are you doing something for people in need? Or do we just think about it? Is it an action or is it just hearing, right? It's supposed to be a doing. 27b, religion that is pure and undefiled before God, the Father, is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction, and to keep oneself unstained from the world. So this word unstained is aspelos in the Greek, spotless and unblemished. So to a Jewish audience, what would unblemished evoke?
Boom.
Excellent. I was waiting from Rich. Yeah, mooms, correct. Okay. So could a sacrifice have mooms?
No.
Couldn't have any blemishes, could it? Okay. Could the priest have a moom? Nope. Because that would interfere with the process of bringing the person who needs the compassion to the compassionate one. They wanted nothing to get in between that relationship. Okay? So in other words, live your life like a proper sacrifice for L. We're supposed to be living that kind of life. We're supposed to be demonstrating that kind of compassion. Will it hurt? Yeah. Will it cost you something? Yeah. But that's for his glory. Welcome to the trials. Boot Camp 101. Okay. Let me see here. How do I want to do this? Give me just a second. I think this was a review page. Yep. Okay. Okay, so let's think about orphans for just a minute. What was the first century plight of the orphans? What was their world like, do you think?
Pretty bleak.
Yeah.
Homeless, no food, no one to take care of them.
Homeless, no food, no care. Do you think maybe they got abused?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, taken advantage of?
Yes.
Would we consider them a vulnerable population?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay. So in a Greek work,
World.
that's what I'm wondering. In a Greek, yeah. So in a Greek world, to show compassion was to show imbalance in your life. So remember how I said all the words are redefined?
Yeah.
This is huge. This was like, I kind of stopped here and spent the rest of the week just pondering this idea. Okay. This is just crazy. Okay. In a Greek world, to show compassion was to show imbalance in your life. You're wrong if you show compassion. That's the Greek worldview. Okay?
Wow.
It was a frightful thing. It suggested, one, that if it could happen to that person, it could also happen to me.
So I got to stay far away.
Yeah, you don't get anywhere near that,
Yeah,
right?
you might catch the cooties.
To acknowledge compassion is to acknowledge the gods might treat me like that. And I don't want anything to do with that. So I don't see a problem. Okay. Number two, compassion requires me to be emotionally moved. So the sense of emotional, huh?
Stoic.
Well, so that's how we have this group called the Stoics, right? So emotionally moved there, the Greek word would be pathos. So we have ethos, ethics, pathos, passions, okay? And then we have, what is the other one? Yeah, logos, I think is the other one. So that would be like logic, okay? So in the Stoic world, I don't want to be moved. I want complete control or certainty over my life. And compassion interferes with that in a big way. Can you wrap your brain around this? Compassion in a Greek world is a negative thing.
It's like having a weakness.
It's a weakness. Yes. Very good. I like that, actually. So think about compassion in the United States for a minute. Again, we're part of a Greek world, right? Okay, we go, well, we wouldn't say necessarily that compassion's a bad thing here. Compassion, we still hold compassion as a good thing, right?
Sure, but oftentimes it's much better from other people than ourselves.
True. There's definitely, we definitely are moving that direction, right? So how, in your life, okay, how has compassion changed from now to from 50 years ago?
We're far more distanced from an institution will take care of those people. We don't have to worry about it.
Interesting. Yes, exactly correct. We've moved to government agencies taking care of the needs of the
We
compassion.
have divorced ourselves from the responsibility, and this is
Exactly. Exactly. Yes. So we would still uphold compassion as a, American value or something like that, but just don't expect me to go do it.
That's for
right?
someone else to take care of.
Right.
I'm not qualified.
And even in the church, I'll tell you this, in the church, in the sense of being a pastoral thing, it's someone else's job to go get involved and disciple that person, because that's messy. I have to get involved in their life and get messy.
Yeah.
Right? So it's easier not to do it. We'll have a cell group instead. We'll have this ministry instead. And then I'll just come and listen to that person. And that way I don't have to go down and get in the deep, dirty parts of their life and hear their story. And maybe it'll cost me a few bucks to help them out. And I'll just give to the March of Dimes.
Oh, there's Compassion International too.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. So we'll just have Christian agencies you can give to.
Yeah.
But do you see how I love the word divorce that you use there. It divorces the responsibility. It divorces our personal relationships and contacts with the people who need the compassion.
Right.
I'll just send a check. So much easier, far more efficient, right? We have become Greek in our own unique way.
As if money's going to cure everything.
Yeah. And again, do you remember about a year or so ago, I had that book I was talking about reading? It was about the church and the giving of money and missions and stuff like this, and how there will be churches that get painted 7 times in a summer down in Mexico. It's the same church getting painted over and over again by different missions groups, but we all want to go and help and stuff like that, right? And more often than not, the people in that church, if you ask them what the problem is, they will not say it's facilities.
No, it's relationship.
It's poverty of relationships and trust and, different issues like this, right? So this is on day 1 when I moved into my loft, I was given permission to stand in front of door number 8 and pray all I want. And this is Nita and David's son, lives in apartment number 8. Like, you can just stand out there all night long and just pray over him because he needs it, right? And so often when I walk past his door, it reminds me of door number 8. I need to pray for William. And so last week, I get a text. And so like 2 weeks ago, I'm coming down the stairs and I start chatting with William. And we say hi every once in a while. We start chatting, and all of a sudden he says, I'm really interested in learning Hebrew. We're talking Bible, and I go, well, that's fascinating. I teach Hebrew. Really? Would you teach me Hebrew? Sure. But you go pray about it first. You make sure this is what you're supposed to do. Okay. So then last week I get this text. Nita texts me. She says, can I send William your phone number? Sure. I get this text. Boom. I'd like to take you up on your offer of learning Hebrew. Oh, fascinating. So then I sit down with his parents 2 days ago at Washburn. And again, he grew up in Uganda. When he's about 8 is when he moved over here to the States. So he's actually been a U.S. citizen longer than he's been, a Ugandan, right? But it's those early birth years of being an orphan there. And so they start describing his life there and talk about a poverty of relationships. So, at a young age, he's pushed out of his house by his parents. Then the uncle doesn't want him after a while. Then the aunt doesn't want him after a while. And so then he's old enough to go into this orphanage. So the orphanage takes him. And so he's never had a stable relationship really in his life, except Nita and David now, right? But he can't seem to be the word.
Overcome.
Yeah, he can't overcome circumstances all the time, jobs and, just all these different issues. And so we're talking this out, and it's like, well, if you've been rejected, and he keeps like, he'll send his parents he's well taken care of, and all these things. Well, you don't love me, and you don't care about me, and all these things. And David's showing me these texts, and I'm like, oh my gosh, I like, my heart would just break if I got one of these from Judah or something like this. He's, oh yeah, he sends these all the time. And I
Well,
go,
he has abandonment issues, major.
yeah, so imagine, and this is the whole society. They've all been rejected by their parents and family members and stuff, and all sent off to these orphanages. And so he comes over here in the land of freedom, where you can do whatever you want, And so even though he has this kind of church Bible background and stuff, he just can't overcome these things. And as soon as he gets any pressure, all of a sudden he's like hiding in his shirt and kind of behind his hands and all these weird manifestations. He's a valedictorian at Marist.
Oh.
He's a smart kid, but something's stopping. They're like, we will do anything if you can fix this. So we're meeting for our first Hebrew lesson on Monday, and we'll see if we can develop it, right? It's going to be a long process, because there's all of this, there's cultural stuff to overcome, very possibly witchcraft stuff to overcome from his childhood, who knows? And, but how exciting at the same time,
Really,
right?
really.
Will it be a trial? Yes. I am fully preparing for a trial, and it could be a glorious thing too, though, right? There's always a way of escape for him, okay?
Hey, Albert.
Yes.
This is but every so often there's this high-pitched squealing fact sound that I'm hearing. Do you know where that's coming from?
Let me check. It's not a.
Oh, right there.
That one? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's I don't know if I can fix that while I'm online. It means I'm getting a message on my phone.
Oh, okay, because it sounds just like a fax in your ear.
Just count it all joy, sister.
Yes, sir.
So
I'm muting you though.
that's fine. So my point with all of this, again, not to delve down into William's life, but that very idea of showing him compassion from a Greek worldview would be weakness on my side, right? What I'm supposed to do is I'm supposed to send him to the right agency to go get him fixed.
Yeah, but God sent him to you.
Because God's model of government works differently than our model of government, right? So when Yaakov says, this is what religion is about, he clearly has in mind people who are not compassionate, people who come from an environment where that is not part of their life or their method of thinking. Now, I think we in general, I wonder if I mute this,
Popular guy.
would they?
Yeah.
Well, it's all.
Yeah, somebody really wants to get a hold of you.
But I'm getting the feedback. So I wonder if I mute that, though, they can't hear me now. I don't know about that. Okay.
So I can tell you what it is. Sorry, you guys.
Yeah, no, it's all coming in because of they're responding to your message about Marcia.
Yeah, distribution list. I don't know why it's doing that, but it's doing it.
It's because they love Marcia and they're showing compassion, and that's a good thing.
Okay, so that beast is like an angel getting his wings.
That's right.
Keep telling yourself that, brother. Keep telling yourself.
The doctoral road of hell. Okay, so a little just fun sidebar here. So I found a new Netflix show to watch. No, it's not Netflix. Amazon Prime, and it's called Good Omens. And
Yeah, I have a friend that watches that.
Judah came over for breakfast and a movie this morning, and brought Solomon with him and stuff, and we had kind of a little family time, and so I show this to him, and he goes, "Yeah, my friends all said this was terrible," and we're just laughing our heads off watching this. And the premise of the show is that there's these two angels. One of them is the snake in the garden, and the other one is the angel that had the flaming sword at the garden, right? And they end up over 6,000 years of history, they become best friends because they have no other social group. And so they start talking to each other, and they kind of like it on the earth. Good food, nice clothes, all these things. And so their solution is, if they knock off the Antichrist, we can stay here longer. I mean, the premise is just kind of hilarious. But so Adam and Eve have, their thing. They get sent out of the garden at the eastern gate, and the angel is so compassionate for them, right? Like, they're going out in this world and they're ferocious beasts and all these things, So he gives them the flaming sword, so that way they can have fire at night and they'll have something to protect themselves with. And so then all throughout all of these episodes, it's like season long, all through these episodes, God keeps showing back going, so where'd you put that sword? He was like, well, I must have lost it or something. And so it just has all these very, funny twists on things. Like, they'll be eating dinner and he's like, so if I went and got you, a cannoli or something like that, I suppose I'd be tempting you then. This is the angel saying it. And he's like, oh, wait, I shouldn't say that. I'm not supposed to tempt people. That's your job. So it's just hilarious, right? Okay, anyway. So this group of people that he's talking to have no sense of compassion in their life. Zero. They were stoics. Okay, that was a bad thing in your life. And we can see how this played out in many third world countries around us today, right? Michael Savage once said that there's a statute of limitations on compassion. So in a third world country, you cannot go out and see people laying in the streets, children begging on the corners, people with homes, without homes and jobs, handicapped people begging. You cannot do that day after day after day after day and not become immune.
I think so. Yeah.
We have people all walking all over India, the dregs of society. No one cares about them because it has.
Mother Teresa.
So in that environment, when she shows up doing that, that's nothing. That's like a nuclear bomb of light going off, right? And she was esteemed by everybody for her acts of compassion, right? Where she and I might sit down and have a few disagreements about the Trinity and things like this. She had the compassion thing right.
Mm-hmm.
And that is what we have here in the first century. These Greeks are immune to the needs of the poor, okay? And Yaakov is trying to shake them up, slap them across the face and say, don't you get it? Our God is compassionate, merciful, and gracious to 1,000 generations, right? So should, if he is, so should you be, okay? So pure and undefiled religion means that you don't allow yourself to become immune to that. It's someone else's responsibility to feed that person.
I think that kind of also goes back to what you were saying about the church groups going to another country, doing good works that really have nothing to do with actually getting down and dirty, just fixing something and leaving,
Mm-hmm.
And I find it interesting that people go to another country and do this and leave. Done, over, bye,
Mm-hmm.
When here in our country, they can't be bothered to do the same thing for their,
another child in their high school.
Yeah, or the poor in their own city,
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I don't know.
That's right. But when you go on the Mexico missions trip, you also get to go to Six Flags. So there is kind of a bonus involved in this, right? They're buying them off.
Oh yeah, and they get to go to a different country and experience a different culture, blah blah blah.
You bet. You bet.
They get something out of it.
If I can say that. Well, I'm just again. I'm watching my tongue here. My goal in going to Uganda to help the orphanage in Uganda, it's actually going to cost me to go do it. So, I'm collecting all these, vitamins for everybody and stuff like this to give to the kids and all of that. But it's not like I'm doing this to make money with the Juice Plus business so that I can go on vacations. I'm happening to go to Uganda, right? All of this is getting collected and 100% goes to the orphans, and Albert pays his bill to go there. Red Cross, only 11% goes to the people that they're helping.
Right.
Oh yeah.
Right? Okay. So scripture's on this other side of this. Okay. He's saying, yeah, no, it's going to cost you. It needs to be a sacrifice on your part. That's what makes it compassionate. Okay. It's going to cost you something. If it doesn't cost you something, it's probably almost useless. Okay. It needs to cost you. Then that becomes like gold. That becomes very valuable to God. Okay. All right. Let me see if there's how much time do we have? Can you guys go 5 more minutes? Are we okay? Are we awake?
Okay.
All right. Let's do chapter 2, verse 1. We've made it out of chapter 1.
I thought you were going to say chapter 2 in like 5 minutes.
Not the whole one. Not just verse 1. Just verse 1.
Maybe the first sentence.
Maybe just the first 2 words. We could get bogged down very easily here. Okay, so my brothers. Who's he writing to?
People that claim to also be believers.
Absolutely. He's talking to
Torah
the church.
observant. Yeah.
Torah observant believers. Show no partiality. Some versions will say like favoritism there. Show no partiality. As you hold the faith in our Master Yeshua HaMashiach, the Lord of glory. So this is actually that phrase used in there, show no partiality as you hold the faith in our Master, is actually a contemporary translation of an ancient idiom. That idiom occurs in both Greek and Hebrew. Okay? So we're going to discover this ancient idiom. But we need to learn a little bit of Greek and Hebrew.
Just the same idiom.
So Greek first. In Strong's, it would be G 4382. Prosopolympsia. Don't say it 3 times fast.
Common spelling.
Okay.
Yeah, common spelling, yes. Okay. Again, BOB says respective persons to partiality, subcategory, the fault of one who, when called on to give judgment, has respect of the outward circumstances of man and not to their intrinsic merits, and so prefers as the more worthy one who is rich, highborn, or powerful to another who does not have these qualities. So prosopone means face, but later it becomes the word mask.
Ooh.
And it's used in
So a false face.
theaters. Yes. So this begs the question, did Yaakov know anything about Greek plays? Was he as much of an entertainment junkie as I am, watching Netflix all the time? So have you ever been to a play?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So if you were to go specific really to a Greek play, but if you went to a play, what is the common symbol that they use for plays?
Oh, the two
Masks.
smiling and the
Two
sad
smiling.
man.
The masks, right? Okay. Those guys,
Yeah.
right?
Comedy and tragedy.
Comedy and tragedy because all Greek plays fall into one of those 2 categories. They're either comedies or tragedies. Okay. So
Sometimes they're both.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was thinking that too.
Sometimes they laugh at the tragedy.
So if we were to look at a real Greek play, you would find these guys running around on stage with masks on, right?
To protect their identity.
In case they're a bad actor, yeah. So here's a clay one in a museum,
Oh.
giant clay mask. Okay.
That was probably the bad guy.
Oh, that's creepy.
Yeah.
Looks like something on Donkey Kong.
Well, the Japanese also use masks in their plays in the kabuki, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So the characters, they represent, the masks represent different characters in Greek plays by employing different masks. There are no costumes and makeup and props. You speak through the mask of the person you're supposed to be speaking for. So when you're up on stage, it's kind of like the thing we grew up with a kid. You guys will be able to help me with this, but it's the old thing about the train and the railroad tracks and the man and the woman, and he's like, you must pay the rent. I can't pay the rent. You must pay the rent. Do you guys remember that? Oh my gosh.
I'm older than you and I don't remember that.
That's
Yeah.
That's silent movie stuff.
Yeah, kind of like that, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So by putting the mask on, I become that person, right? But it's a facade. It's completely fake. I'm not really that person, okay? So in Oriental cultures, ancient Near East cultures, the face stood for honor, reputation, name, status, position in society. This is why we talk about in Oriental cultures the idea of saving face. They don't want to do something to dishonor their family, so they will try to help you and do things for you to save face and not look like they're stupid. Because if they can't help you, then that brings dishonor to the family. So they want to save face. Okay, so it's not personal favoritism. So again, here's another word that doesn't mean what we think it means. Okay, it's not personal favoritism as we think of it when he says partiality there. So this last week, I guess it was last week, Mike, my friend Mike, he has been on this journey for a couple years now, and we got him eating a clean diet, and then he started into keeping Sabbath, and he's moving down this road, right, of how to do these things, right? And he's kind of looking for a better job and stuff like that. And so my friend Sarah from Junction City, she says, "Oh, we're looking for some people in banking. I'm specifically looking for someone who has a background in accounting." And I'm like, ding, 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 ding. Mike has a degree in accounting. So I take them both to coffee this last week and get them together and meet them. Why would I do that? Because I'm showing favoritism to those in the kingdom of God, right? It's first to our brothers and sisters. You make sure that you're taking care of the family first, right? And they end up having this fabulous meeting and stuff. And hopefully in the next month or so, he may be switching jobs and becoming a banker, right? And this will be a great thing for his family and everything. So it's the idea of when you are showing favoritism, you can diminish someone's status in doing this by not showing them favoritism, right? So you could lose face in your city if the city is defaced. So if you have hoodlums running around defacing things and knocking Caesar's nose off or something like that, then off of the statue, right? If you're defacing it, then that would cause your city to lose honor. It looks bad.
You can't control your population.
Right. Okay. So Devarim, Deuteronomy 10:17 says, "For Jehovah your God is the God of gods and the Lord of lords, a great God, a mighty God, and a terrible God, which regardeth not persons, nor taketh reward." So regards not persons, that's no partiality, right? Nor taketh rewards, bribes.
Right.
Okay. So Moshe is writing to an ancient Israelite coming out of Mitzrayim. So what does that tell you about the culture of Mitzrayim?
There might have been bribes and there might have been favoritism.
This is why he's giving us this commandment, right? So if you needed to get something done and you needed Paro's approval, you just go and bribe everybody that is in the process, right? And you pay him off, you grease him, makes things happen everywhere in the world. When I was in Morocco, we were bribing people left and right. And I'm just like, this is really wrong, I think. But in their culture, it's how you got things done. You could go places that you couldn't go, with a bribe. So does Yah show favoritism? He says, I will show mercy to those I show mercy, right? Compassion. Jacob I have loved, and Esau I have hated. Autocorrect there. So you can't bribe God. It is not about what we do. Okay, but he does show favoritism. Scripture is very clear about that. What God does is the definition of good. He can do no wrong. That's what makes him God, right? He has wisdom. He has the big picture. He has understanding, okay? And the way God manifests to mankind includes favoritism to some. That's part of the deal. Okay?
You're my people, I'll treat you well, and you get these things. If you're not, you don't get it.
And he's within his right to make that rule. Because that's good, he says. Okay? Yah shows favoritism to Israel. But it's not the way we look at favoritism. What we call favoritism is a bribe. God's not bribing us to do these things. Okay? There's a difference. Okay, yeah. So when I was in college, when I was doing this psychology program, I studied something called behavioristic psychology. You would, in general, know it as positive reinforcement. Okay, that's one of 4 ways that you can get something done. You could also punish a child, which is not a positive reinforcement, okay? That is a negative reinforcer, and it's going to make him not do that behavior again, right? Okay. Positive reinforcement is, this is how we got my daughter, Courtney. She wouldn't crawl at the beginning, and we put a Pepsi in front of her, clinked the glass a few times, and she crawled to it and drank it. Instant positive reinforcement. She went, sugar. Ah! Says, she never stopped crawling, right? Okay, so that'd be a positive reinforcer. Negative reinforcers, and then there's something called response cost. Response cost is if you eat your vegetables, you can have a scoop of ice cream. Pay it off. Okay? So there was this huge, this is a graduate school, huge discussion we had to have about, isn't this bribing kids if you do this? Okay. So
no, it's not a bribe.
Yes, and what's your point?
If it's in their best interest, it's not a bribe.
Right.
Okay. I'm doing this for their benefit to help them learn to eat their peas and carrots.
Right, but
or peas and ferrets.
But if you have a child in the store throwing a temper tantrum and you tell them if they stop, they can have a candy bar, that is not good.
Yeah, punishment might work better.
Yeah.
There might be other choices, right? Yeah. If you stop now, I'll let you live. You could use response cost.
Yeah, there you go.
Okay. So our version of favoritism or bribing is different than what he's doing. Okay. So we don't do things to appease God. I don't obey the commandments because I'm appeasing God. Okay. The principles that Yah operates on is beyond what we can imagine. He is beyond us. Okay. But he has in his calculus figured out that showing favoritism to a group of people is part of his equation. We have to accept that. Okay. So the point is that we discussed in the book of Job that it's not God that's on trial, but his policies that are on trial in the book of Job. Okay. His justice and favoritism towards Israel is beyond our understanding. He shows favor to Israel not because of what they do, because he is good. Jeremiah, in the book of Jeremiah, he says, why does Yah favor me when I don't want this job? Jeremiah didn't want the job of being the suffering prophet. Totally get that, right? He says, but why are you showing me favor? I don't want this. We could go find someone who'd want to be a prophet, give it to them. He says, no, I'm favoring you. Just part of his calculus.
Well, because that other person probably would do it very good.
Yeah, again, God knows the bigger calculus, right? He sees the bigger picture. Nita, a couple years ago, started taking wedding dresses over to Uganda. I think I've shared that with you guys. And so over there, they rent wedding dresses instead of buying them because no one could afford them. And so this company calls her up a couple weeks ago, and she thought this was like a one-time thing. Then it became a two-time thing. Now she gets this call from this wedding place here in town, and they're like, oh, we got like 23 new dresses for you. All last year's models. We don't want them. They're yours. She's like, well, I didn't want to take any more over. I was done. But God's just putting favor on her for whatever reason to do more with this, right? She didn't want it. Okay, she thought she was done. Was the termination of the Amalekites good?
No, because it led to their destruction.
Yeah, maybe from their perspective, it wasn't good. Was it good from God's perspective?
Yes.
Absolutely.
That was his
He
intention.
probably wouldn't have done it.
Otherwise, he wouldn't have done it, right? Okay, so was this is where it gets tough. Was the Holocaust acceptable in God's mind?
He allowed it.
Yeah.
He allowed the trial, didn't he? Okay. It may not fit into my view of justice. Okay. Do you remember the conversation at TBI years ago with Shlomo? And he was having a hard time with why God let all those Jews die. Does that kind of sound familiar? So in his worldview, see, he's saying, my view of justice doesn't line up with this God in the Bible. Why does he get to kill all these people? My point would be simply, he knows better than you do. His calculus is better than, and he was like a math professor, right? But I'm sorry, God's calculus is better than your calculus. If you were the one in charge of the world, it would be different, right? And it wouldn't be better because you are only a man, right? God's calculus involves favoritism. It just does.
But he's a good bookkeeper.
Yes.
3,000 died at Sinai and 3,000 were brought into the kingdom in Acts.
You bet. So favoritism is just one of those things we just have to accept it as part of the covenant deal, right? When you get in the covenant, he now has all authority. Well, even outside of the covenant, God shows favoritism to whomever he shows favoritism to for whatever reason. That's his issue. It can't be our issue. Our job isn't to wander through life going, why isn't life fair? Why didn't I get that? Why didn't I get that?
Life is
Woe
never
is me.
fair.
Well, as I like to say, if life were fair, I would have been born tall, dark, and handsome. And I only got 2. So, it happens, right?
But I find
Tall, dark, and hairy.
out of those
Sounds like a cat.
first, what do you call it, definitions of this, mine says personal favoritism.
Mm-hmm.
I think false face is the most accurate because what he's dealing with here is they're showing preferential treatment to the wealthy and not to the poor. And it's putting a false face on who you are.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Or who God is, because we're personal representatives of the Father.
Yes.
And we could make a very good biblical case that the poor actually do receive more favor from God. Because what typically happens is that the wealth gets in the way and we lose that personal relationship. They're actually relying on it from moment to moment to moment in their lives. Right? So again, how we measure favor is different than how God measures favor too. It's not always just money, right? It could be relationships. It could be lots of different things. It could be different traits inside kindness. And again, we there's this weird thing that happens that they've done whole YouTube videos of this. Is people will go out, they'll buy a pizza and they go give it to a person sitting on a park bench, and that person will share it with a whole bunch of other people that he knows. You take that same pizza and you go give it to a guy standing in the mall and he eats it all.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, wow, God blessed me. Right? The poor person says, I could help a lot of people with this. Who's more compassionate? Right? So we have to be really careful about how we look at what that favoritism is. Maybe we're the ones missing the boat. So, wow, we've got all these beautiful edifices that we've made all over our country of buildings, that stained glass windows and all these things. Maybe sometimes God looks at those and he says, money would have been spent better other places, right? So we have to be careful with that. So, all right. Well, I hope you have enjoyed James chapter 1. I've gotten a lot out of this the last few weeks, not just in terms of understanding Yaakov, but pulling out all of these Old Testament principles and learning more about the Tanakh and how James understood the Tanakh and stuff like that. So, all right. You want to kick us off here, Bill? Yep. Kick us off into the Super Bowl?
Blessed are you, Yehovah, our Father and our King. Father, we come before you thanking you that you are merciful and kind to your servants. Thank you for teaching us how to live. May we follow your example. Father, we thank you also for the blessing of food that you provide so abundantly. Thank you for remembering your servants. Thank you for providing. We give you thanks in the name of your Son, Yeshua, our soon-coming Mashiach King. Amen.
Amen. Another angel got his wings. I'm going to think that now every time I hear this. It's going to kill me.
Change the notification sound.
All right. Thanks for joining us, everybody.
Yep. See you later, guys.
All right. Hang in there, buddy.
Thanks. Okay.
Open that.
Bye, Isa.
I think she's off already.